Manage mentoring for getting started in beekeeping. This is how to perform a traditional split. I am Kevin England. In this lesson, we will review some recommended precursor steps along with a step-by-step description of how to execute a traditional split. After describing the process, we'll run through the post-split instructions, including temporarily relocating the split and subsequently returning it to your apiary. In describing the actual process of performing a split, we're going to suggest to do it well, there's actually two activities. The first activity is reviewing the source colony and taking stock of what's inside. Then you're going to need to figure out what you require when performing the task. The previous lesson covered the basics of making a split, and here we are going to walk the process. Typical guidance for a traditional split is to make the split and move it off of your property. Logically, that requires you to consider your logistics. How are you going to transport the split? Where are you going to place it? What equipment do you need? Make sure that you have that all set up ahead of time prior to conducting the activity. Additionally, we would recommend that you do a hive inspection in advance. Perform the inspection with the end goal in mind. Take special notes of the distribution of resources and layout of the contents within the colony. This can give you a good head start to finding the queen and a sense of which frames you might target for the split. Usually you would do this a day or two ahead of the actual operation. When you go in to perform that inspection, have a queen excluder handy. Sometimes while performing the inspection, you see that the density of bees is so high that you know you're going to have a hard time finding the queen when performing the actual split. If you think that to be the case, you can place the queen excluder between the two boxes, assuming it's a double deep. And when it comes time to perform the split, look for the box that has brood in progress, and you'll know that when it comes to moving the queen out of the split, she'll be in the box that has brood in progress. That makes your job quite a bit easier when it comes time to finding the queen to move her to the traditional split. Most splits use the tactic of moving a brood frame that has the queen on it. And fortunately, it's fairly common to find the queen right in the middle of the brood nest during inspection. However, sometimes the queen's going to be found in the fringes, and you may not wish to move the frame that she's resident on into your split. If this is the case, then you're required to pick her up and move her directly to a new split. Hopefully, as you get into your second season, you've acquired the skills of doing this task. If you followed the previous guidance, then the next step should be a logical progression. If you haven't been in the hive, then you'll need to assess as you go. As indicated on the slide, you'll source the target frames, and for the purpose of a traditional split, we will assume in that process find the queen and move her to the new box. In the next few slides, we will step through the specific instructions. Set up your receiving equipment alongside the original colony. Smoke the hive and make entry inspecting the colony for the target resources. Move the frames with the bees and resources to the new hive. As you move each of the frames, set it up as nature would structure it. Brood in the center, pollen near the brood, and nectar and honey resources to the outside. As you perform the extraction, move the queen, preferably to the center of the new nest, using care to protect her from any damage in the move. Use light smoke as you go, and when the new hive is set, close it by placing the inner cover and roof. Turning back to the original colony, you're going to have to implement a plan for closing the open spaces. We're going to walk through a couple steps to consider. The simplest choice is to place frames in the spaces where you source the resources from the split. You can use frames with drawn comb or foundation frames. Most times, if you put those in and amongst a brood area, the bees will not want open space in an active brood chamber, and they will build them out relatively quickly. A more common approach is to reorganize the remaining frames into a logical structure and create opportunity space in the fringes. This would be especially true as a swarm management practice of opening up the box and relieving congestion. You would organize the nest in the bottom box and surround it with food resources alongside and above. The open space is kept in the periphery, and you would fill the gaps with frames with foundation or drawn comb if you have it. Now, one logical consideration is that the origin colony does not have a queen. As noted by the slide, there's a couple different options. Whatever case you choose, let them raise a queen, let them carry through with a swarm cell, supply them a queen in some manner. Make sure that you have a plan to follow this hive back to its normal operation and ensure that eventually in your inspections you find that this hive is queen right and it gets back to rearing brood in all stages. After you pull your split, execute your plan to temporarily relocate that split to a location away from the apiary. Leave it there until it's grounded to that location, and the bees exiting would not return to the origin hive if you brought them back home. Once they're oriented to the temporary location, they will coalesce with their nestmates and it'll be safe to bring them back into your apiary. We recommend you return them at night so you can capture all of the foragers prior to pulling it from the remote location, and then move it back to your yard. The bees, upon exiting in the morning, will realize that they've moved to another location, reorient, and then become grounded to the spot that you've placed them. Make sure wherever you place the bees that you provide a defense for them. Do not provide them with upper entrances and close down the main entrance to the smallest location. Remember, if you're pulling a nuke, they only have a quarter of the size of the workforce, and chances are they don't have a large contingent of bees to mount a defense. Everything that you could do to keep them safe while they rebuild is in your best interest. As they continue to grow, you can increase the box size and open the entrance once they have a large enough workforce to defend themselves against all takers. In this lesson, we walked you through the instructions of making a conventional split. Following this lesson, we have two more to give you, some additional alternatives. The first one's a walk-away split, which, if you found this process a little daunting in instructions, it's a much simpler process for making splits and more ideal for beginners. The lesson following that is the Day-Marie process, which is the opposite end of the spectrum. It's a pretty complicated process used for swarm control, and you'll understand how that works when you review the lesson. Speaking of swarm control, the lesson following that is swarm captures. If you happen to get calls for swarms and how to pick them up, we'll give you the instruction, and we'll also talk a little bit about swarm traps. Once we close out splits and swarms, we'll turn to how to do honey harvesting, how to get the honey off of the stack, and how to actually harvest and bottle it. If you have questions, you can ask at our next online session. You can also send an email to the address on the slide. If you're watching from YouTube, you can leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the next lesson.